Yeah.
Yeah, we can move someone into theirs, but where are they gonna go? We need about 100 homes to be built all in 1 year so that people start to move around.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
We
Good.
don't have any builders.
Well, we're working on it.
Well, that'd be awesome. Because, yeah, we have Darren who's building, but, you know, he doesn't build them fast enough.
Yeah.
And some of that is they can't get enough workers to do the building.
Well, and then your cost of materials now is
And cost of
ridiculous.
materials.
We're gonna be short of labor when all this stuff starts rolling in. It's gonna be a labor shortage big time.
Yep.
It's all you guys' fault. If you just wouldn't let everything come in, we'd have it made.
We're gonna bring Weber out. We're gonna
Well,
bring
bah
Weber,
humbug to you.
Well, see,
Bring
I
Weber
was
out of
blaming
retirement.
Maryland, so.
Okay, no, I haven't, didn't mean to say that, I met with development folks, and I guess I learned a long time ago that it's easier to copy somebody else's plan than to recreate your wheel, and so
It's a big bank president.
Sit down and get my head.
He's on the
Sorry. Would you like this seat? I appreciate it. I'm Todd from campus. Okay.
526.
526.
526.
Well, I broke another law, so.
Okay, how about that Chiefs game?
Oh, wasn't that fun?
Hey, Gary.
Yeah, I was hoping they'd get beat.
we haven't started.
No.
Is it possible that they can pass it on from this meet, I assume it goes from this.
Say what?
To this full
Every
city.
damn
of
day
Monmouth.
I'm looking.
They can
Really, really.
go ahead and move it on, and then the city
Oh,
can
yeah.
still pull back out.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I'd like us to continue to talk, but I don't wanna create any kind of.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
What do we have after the hearing? Oh, yeah, okay. So let me ask you, where's the notification of a public hearing in this room? I say there's a notification of a public hearing, where is it?
I have no idea.
Is that right?
In the back of the room.
Where?
Rascal meeting falls right there.
door.
On the big wall, right?
Yeah.
I finally
Big signs.
decided maybe I better figure out where it is.
I don't care.
You don't care. Oh, jeez.
There's Open Meeting Act right on it.
Yeah. You can read that?
Yeah.
You can't say is that something we should care about?
Yeah, it is. We have to abide by all those rules.
What's the pay?
Yeah, what's the pay?
Yeah,
About as much as you get here.
I don't know, I'm pretty poor.
Maybe quitting. What?
Hey, Michelle, did you talk to Joe?
Realtors and 25 homes to sell.
Joe, the
You may need a hobby, is that what you're saying?
The
Did
pay's
you talk to
well.
him? You said you were
I'm
gonna.
ready to go. I don't think
Okay.
that's gonna get
No, we have.
Okay,
Well, I
we're
don't
missing. Do you know if Tristan or Lee are coming?
She didn't hear back from either Tristan
Either
or
one of
Lee,
them?
did you?
Tristan or Lee?
From either one.
Wonderful.
Since I sent the message out, I didn't bother calling them. 'Cause I thought-
So we nominate them as chair.
Now aren't here,
Yeah, that's how we do it in this house.
now gets the responsibility.
I was nominated, is that a long time ago? But then I never got that chair.
You were vice chair.
Oh, I thought then you moved up.
Huh.
Oh, well, that's a good thing to know. Why nominate Michelle for
be
chair?
chair?
That's not what I'm saying.
The only way you move up is if she's ever absent, then you fill in.
Oh, well, thank you, Mary.
And I
for not
threatened,
being-
but COVID kept.
That's why you threatened this month.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What are you threatening?
Okay, I'll threaten you if you don't like.
I'd be scared of her.
Especially with that thing in her hand.
Her bite's worse than her bark. Her bark's worse than her bite. Whatever.
January meeting of the North Platte Planning Commission will come to order. Roll call.
Davies, Winder, Fudge,
Yep.
Bain,
Here.
Weber,
Yes,
McGann,
Yes.
Jett,
Here.
Forbes,
Yes.
and Whirl.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Current copy of the Open Meetings Act of Nebraska is posted at the back of the council chambers. You've all received a copy of the minutes of our December 28th meeting.
Madam Chair, move to approve the minutes as presented.
second.
Fudge moved, Weber seconded. Oh, I bet we have to do the clicker thing, don't we?
Got it right here.
It's been a while.
Okay. Approval of minutes passes. Item number 3 on the agenda is a public hearing to discuss and consider action on adoption of the 2021 City of North Platte Annexation Study, East 4th Street and East Highway 30, and the proposed annexation of the property described in the study, and more particularly the property that is described on your sheet of paper. I'm going to turn it over to Judy.
Okay, you should have all received a copy of the review comments. Attached to that, you would have received a copy of the full study that includes the appendix. And then attached to that, you would also see a copy of the resolution that was passed at City Council asking Planning Commission to take a look at the study and make a recommendation. Attached to that, and you guys don't normally look at ordinances, but I did attach those just so you have kind of an idea of what's going to go forward to Planning Commission. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to make as a little bit of an amendment. We did miss one parcel number, and so we're going to add that parcel number. It's 0058905.00. That's going to be added to both the study and the ordinance. I need to make sure that it's in there correctly. The legal description is there. It's just one of those things that after going through this, if you've read it, you might understand why that typographical error may have been made. The other thing I want you to understand is when we're proposing this annexation, it does include the roads. So it would include that portion of Highway 30 that is abutting the proposed annexation. It would include that portion of Newberry Access that is shown in the study. The other thing, what we are looking at doing is making a 4th ordinance. So it would be taking off some of Central's property and putting it in an ordinance by itself. So the airport would be its own ordinance. Central's property would be its own ordinance. Kroll's would then be its own ordinance, and then the Erickson property would be its own ordinance. So there's 4 separate ordinances instead of the 3 as presented. So I wanted to kind of clear that up before we move forward. I'm not sure how you want me to do this, but basically, as you go through the study, this is required by law to do a study when you do any type of annexation. We had received a request from the North Platte Airport Authority to look at annexing the airport property. There's some issues with annexing the airport property. They are not directly to abutting the city of North Platte. So we had to figure out how to get there and still meet Nebraska state statute. So this is why we went through what we did. If you look at study areas, we broke it down into 3 separate study areas. Each of those study areas, page 12, shows basically an overall, I put it in a chart form. I thought that was maybe easy to understand. What state statute says when you do a study is you have to make sure that it is easily understood to the general public. So that's kind of my idea behind this chart and graph, is to just make it so that it's really easy to see. You can see what the current zoning is, what the surrounding property zoning is, if it meets state statute regulations as far as being adjacent to, being urban or suburban in character, those types of things. It goes down, when you're looking on 12, it also talks about utilities and a plan to service those properties. That does not necessarily mean the city tomorrow is going to go out and service each of those properties. It means that we have a plan in place for the possibility of servicing those properties, what that cost would be. And as you move on, it keeps showing the different study areas, and I kind of split those again. Page 20 starts with what the impacts would be if we did annex these properties. And for the most part, if you go down through that and you're reading those, these properties are already in the city's 2-mile jurisdiction. And what that does with the city of North Platte being a city of the first class, they have a 2-mile jurisdiction when it comes to planning, zoning, and building. The effects of services may be things like fire and police, because there's a difference between if the city fire department would go out to these or if the rural fire department would go. And that's based on jurisdiction. The airport's a little bit different because a lot of times the airport takes care of their own security, takes care of their own fire. But there is some cooperation between the city and the county sheriff's department and those. So very limited impact by annexing these properties. It does do a few things for the city. Of course, it makes the city larger. We increase our acres, which is a good thing for several reasons. And we increase our lane miles as far as highways go. What that does is that increases our funding for state and federal fund for lane miles. It increases our ability to be able to tap into some economic development funds if we have more acres in the city. Things such as blight and substandard designation. The city can have up to 35% of their property designated blighted and substandard. If we add more property, that makes our current designated blighted and substandard areas decrease a little bit, because I think we're at approximately 26% as we sit right now. But it does open up some additional funding. The one thing that there were some concerns about that I've gotten a few phone calls about is extending our 2-mile jurisdiction. So on page 24, which is essentially the last page of the narrative, it talks about some recommendations. One of the recommendations that I wanted to provide you and the city council with is to not extend that 2-mile extraterritorial jurisdiction until we know for sure that this proposed annexation goes through. So here's a couple of things. The reason you do in separate ordinances is because anybody has a right to challenge an annexation. And I know this is the first time any of you have ever done an annexation. So they do have a right to challenge. They have a year to do that. So if we went ahead and passed this and went and grabbed the 2-mile jurisdiction, and then something were to happen and it would be overturned in court, and we got to go back and get rid of the 2-mile jurisdiction, which is going to make a real mess. So what my suggestion is to go ahead with the annexation, get that all done, wait a year, and then come back and increase our 2-mile jurisdiction at that point. What the 2-mile jurisdiction does is that gives us some added protection when it comes to planning, zoning, and building, so that we have a little bit of control over how the city expands in that 2-mile area. If you have any questions, I am here to answer them. I have asked Brent Birkland. He helped me out a lot with the study, so he's here to answer any questions. I see Lane, Public Service Director, is also in the audience, so if you have any questions for any of us, we'd be happy to answer.
Okay, before we start the testimony, I do want to say that we as the Planning Commission members value your input, and we want to hear from you during the public hearings. If you wish to speak, first recognized by me, by the chair, and then once you're recognized, come up to the podium and state your name and your address. And I don't anticipate lengthy type testimonies tonight, so I'm not going to put a time limit on it. All right, so whoever would like to come up first and speak, yes. Name and address.
I'm Mike Jacobson, 3020 West Leota. I'm here on behalf of the North Platte Airport Authority. I serve as their chairman. And as it was indicated, we did submit a letter asking for this annexation to occur. I know there's been a lot of questions about why is that. I listened to the testimony at the city council meeting. I listened to the questions that were raised, and I thought this might be a good place to answer many of those questions so that the planning commission's up to speed and everybody really understands what our motivations are and why we're pursuing the annexation. I want to start with the fact that the airport authority is a separate authority. Our board is elected by the people who live in the city limits of the city of North Platte. We aren't elected by ward, so the entire population, like the mayor, we are elected by everyone at large in the city. Airport authorities can be created either under a city or under a county. Ours was set up under the city. There are statutes out there that provide for an airport authority to exist. They will continue to exist as long as there's bonded indebtedness outstanding, and I can assure you that's probably going to continue. We have a number of masters, if you will. The airport authority is really set up to operate the airport and oversee all of the operations, including if we choose to work with a fixed-based operation or an FBO to service general aviation. We would be the ones that would be working with them, and really our responsibilities would be to provide management of the airport properties. The FAA has a very big interest in what we do and have a lot of control over how we operate as well. And we get a lot of funding, grant funding, through the FAA called AIPs, or Airport Improvement Projects, which typically the AIPs are a 90-10 cost share, where the government, federal government, the FAA would fund 90%, and we would fund 10%. A lot of restrictions on it, very complicated. I leave a lot of that to Sam to figure out what we need to do in terms of what qualifies. I would tell you that as we just completed a 20-year long-range plan for the airport. I think many people have seen that. That has been approved. That plan would include the building of a new airport terminal. Kind of as a point of reference, I believe Kearney's done 2 major improvements in their airport terminal with a new facility. Scottsbluff has a new modern facility. I believe North Platte has the oldest airport terminal of any city our size in the Midwest at this point. Very dated. And probably the biggest thing that it lacks is a jet bridge and some of the modern amenities that we're seeing elsewhere. Plus, we've got a building that's starting to require more and more infrastructure inside it, so we are looking at that, and a significant amount of that new terminal would be available for AIP funding. Because of the split on how that works, we will probably have to come up with closer to 40 or 50% of the funding, and the other would come from AIP. As a bigger part of what we're looking at doing is we're looking at part of the long-range plan is the area to the west of the existing terminal building and south. The long-range plan shows that there would be more hangars built there, largely for private companies, and that we would continue to expand the airport and try to bring more economic development to the airport itself, to that property. If you start looking at what's going on in North Platte today, we're on the cusp of hopefully having a beef packing plant here. That will be a major new employer. We're on the cusp of potentially having a rail park developed and a trade zone, interior trade zone developed within that rail park. Both major projects. We sit on Interstate 80. We have the Union Pacific Railroad. We have Highway 83 running north and south. So if we can develop a rail park and we can keep air, including the SkyWest service that we have today, and expand that. We're also looking at potentially a new golf course, which would be a major golf course affiliated with a number of other high-end courses around the country. What that spells out is more corporate jets. I would fully expect that with sustainable beef, they will likely have some major corporate investors that will likely come here to check on their investment and probably do it by air. I doubt if they're gonna take the bus. So if they're bringing those jets in, many of them are gonna be looking for places to house them, and that means we're probably gonna need to see more hangar space. That can be built two ways. The airport authority, all of the buildings out there, with the exception of one, that would be that of a local bank who built a hangar for themselves, and that is on the tax rolls. Every other structure at the airport is not on the tax rolls because they were either tax exempt themselves, meaning weather service in particular, their building, they have a building out there. All of the land is either owned by the city of North Platte or the airport authority. That's within our jurisdiction, okay? And it's all, because it's airport and operated by the airport authority, it's all property tax exempt. So if we build anything out there and lease it, that user does not pay property taxes, any property taxes. If we were to encourage private investment, and I would tell you initially at the time that we made this reference, we were expecting Trigo Dugan, who's our current FBO operator, to build the new hangar, build a new FBO building, potentially build a second story, put their corporate headquarters there. Since that time, through the process, they have negotiated to put their corporate headquarters in downtown North Platte, which I think was a good move. I think that's a better place for their corporate headquarters to be. But they're also looking and rethinking whether or not they want to proceed with the hangar and FBO building. We're committed that we feel that we need the hangar. And if it was going to be built privately, then property taxes become an issue, because if they were to lease the land from the airport authority like the bank does and build their own hangar like the bank did, then it's subject to property taxes. If the airport authority builds it and leases it back to them, there are no property taxes, none. So our thought was that if we want to attract investor capital to build out the infrastructure to the west, if we could offer tax increment financing to those private companies to build their own hangars, they would be off the tax rolls for 15 years, back on the tax rolls for 25 years until the 40 until the 40 years ran, which is when they would, the length of what the lease would be from the airport authority, and then they'd go back off the tax rolls at that time, because then the airport authority would own the building and the land. We will always own the land. We can't sell the land and make it fee simple. And so the private investors could only own the building itself for up to 40 years of a lease. So as you can see, if the airport authority is willing to go out and bond it out, build the structures, lease it back, nothing comes on the tax rolls. If we have this as part of the city limits, have it declared blighted and substandard in that area, and can offer tax increment financing to private investors, we could perhaps attract investment capital to come in and build out that infrastructure, not having to bond it out ourselves, give them 15 years of a property tax exemption, bring it on the tax rolls for up to 25 years, and then go back off the tax rolls again. So that's the benefit to the city. Keep in mind, obviously, blight and substandard determination would have to be, to get there, you'd have to first be in the city limits. You'd have to do a blight study. You'd then have to get the city council to vote the majority to declare it blighted and substandard, a portion of it. And then you would have to vote and have it after a public hearing to approve a TIF project. All of those steps would have to be followed before you could ever TIF a project out there. The alternative is that the airport authority can just go ahead, leave things the way they are, and just go ahead and do our own bonding or borrowing, do a full-term lease to an investor, and it's tax-free. So to us, it's really a matter of, do we want to attract some private capital? Okay. The other thing that we see is that would bring a large land mass into the city, land that the city indirectly owns. They own some of it directly, they own the rest of it indirectly through the airport authority. The city has sewer and water that runs out to the edge of the property, and the airport authority extends it from there. So we already have access to city sewer and water. We have our own fire station out there and fire equipment, everything we need to maintain the runways. So it seems to make sense to make it part of the city. And of course, all the things that Judy's outlined would be the rest of the reasons why it would make sense to annex it in. We started the ball rolling by making the request. It's really up to you and the city council if you want to proceed with it. We'll operate one way or the other and get done what we want to do, but I think the ability to attract private capital should be enticing, I think, to everyone, and provide, as the city grows, provide the investors coming in that are investing in our community to have the opportunity to own their facilities as opposed to leasing them from out of the gate. So that's kind of what we're looking at. That's the motivation for why we brought this to begin with. And I'd answer any questions you might have now or through the course of the evening. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mike Drain. I'm with the Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District, headquartered out of Holdridge, Nebraska. Our address there is running off the top of my, it's 415 Lincoln Street, sorry. I'm used to us giving us the post office box. 415 Lincoln Street in Holdridge, Nebraska. Right now, Central is actually still in the process of looking into what the potential consequences of adding Central's land into the city limits would be. We have, for your reference, we have 5 contiguous parcels that you've identified that are south of the airport on the Platte River that we have in the area of our diversion dam, where we pool the water and divert the water out of the Platte. The ID numbers for those are 0058915.00, 0058900.00, 0058890.00, I don't expect you to remember all these. 0058905.00, which is the one that Judy mentioned already that had actually been inadvertently left off, and 00589.1.00. But really what it is the land that Central owns that is along the river at and for a short distance west of our diversion dam. I do want to mention that Judy has been talking with my staff about the potential issues associated with this, and I appreciate that very much. So, as of today, what I can tell you is Central is simply neutral on the question of whether or not our land should be incorporated into the city limits. We're not aware of any specific negative consequence that would arise from this. But that doesn't mean that there might not be. And in particular, what we're looking to avoid is an unknown situation where today there might not be any kind of regulation that the city has that would interfere with our operations, but we don't know what future city regulations might be. Our project is operated under the control of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in conformance with the Federal Power Act, which provides that operation of our project it's not a dual jurisdiction with the state or any sub-state entities. It is what's referred to as exclusive control. So if there were ever a conflict between something that we need to do to operate our project and something that the city would like to have us do or not do because of their own regulation, I can tell you that under Supreme Court determination what the outcome of that would be. But it's our concern is not to win an argument. Our concern is to potentially at least avoid whether we even have those kinds of issues at all. That being said, I suspect that there can be some good reasons for maintaining the boundary where it has been proposed. In particular, I've identified, you probably can't see it from here, but this is, if you can just make out the orange line, and I can pass this around potentially, Log Top. If you can make out the orange line, that is the lands that are owned by Central, and I can certainly see how this actually goes along with it. If you want to see its location within the overall plan. I can certainly see how a line that follows the one proposed is at least easier for someone to look at on a map than the jagged one that would be imposed by keeping our lands out. And it's also possible that there could be some benefits to Central by being inside. All I can tell you today is that we're continuing to look at it. I'd like to plan on continuing to have some discussions with Judy. I know that there will be another hearing next month, I believe it is, or is it in 2 weeks?
No, February 15th, so yes, next
Yeah,
month.
next month, and, so maybe we'll have maybe we'll have a request to keep our lands out of the city limits at that time, and maybe we will not. I want you to be aware of it, and also, I wanted to make myself then available to answer any questions, but I can't tell you what the lake level is out of McConaughey today.
Any questions at this time? Okay, before we finish, I'll call you back up. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I'll just let those maps go around and grab them from you later.
Chairperson McGann, Planning Commissioners, Gary Pearson, President of North Platte Area Chamber Development Corporation, 502 South Dewey. Believe it or not, I'm going to make this brief for all the reasons that Mr. Jacobson and Judy Clark both outlined. Make a lot of common sense argument and economic argument for annexing this property. It's the only ability cities have to geographically grow. So if you look at North Platte in general, besides Old Town North Platte, which was originally established, everything was annexed over time. The old development rule was once you ask for and receive city services, part of that was to be annexed. Some of that in various cities around Nebraska has kind of got away from that general development practice that was the original intent for annexation, is to expand those services. But we look at the potential here, not only being able to grow the geographic footprint in North Platte, but to have a potential industrial air park that could entice that private investment that Mike was talking about, but to be able to market a community that would have not only a traditional business park, Twin Rivers Business Park, that caters to truck transportation and industry, but also to have a rail park nearby in North Platte at Hershey and an air industrial park. We'd really be clicking on all three cylinders when it comes to trying to attract additional investment and economic development in the community. So I'd like to encourage you to support the annexation.
Thank you. No other comments from the audience? Okay. Any questions at this point for anyone who testified? If not, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Bain motioned, Weber second. To close the public hearing, clicker vote. Maybe.
Okay.
Okay, motion carries. Public hearing is closed, so now it's time for us to discuss.
So, did I catch earlier that you want to deal with this in 4 separate ordinances,
Yes,
almost specifically for this sort of reason?
yes,
Okay.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
Because basically what happens, if we would do it all in one ordinance and one property owner decided to protest, that throws everything out. So if we do it in 4, I originally proposed 3, but I think 4 at this point was probably gonna be a better option. The only thing that would cause possibly a problem is if study area, I believe 2, would protest, then we're gonna have a problem with the connection of the airport. But we're hoping that those do not get protested, and we would go ahead and go forward with that. But that just keeps it to where if one of them gets thrown out, that doesn't necessarily mean it throws out everything. One of the things, in order to annex, you have to be adjacent and contiguous to city limits.
So two- two's
State-
an important one.
State statute does allow us to skip 250 feet, but 250 feet is not very far. So,
So basically, it's that little piece right there.
yep, yep.
So if the Jenga piece gets pulled out,
Okay,
it doesn't necessarily kill the whole thing. If for some reason Central comes back and says, there's a good reason why and here's why, it's becomes okay at that point. I get why you want that clean line as opposed to
yes.
that.
And there's a couple of different reasons. By taking Central in, it sets us up for future annexation to the south. The Twin Rivers housing development that's to the south, you're closer to that if you do have Central's property in there. Central's property, and the gentleman did say they don't see anything that's going to be a detriment to them. And that's what our conversations have been back and forth, that there's really no real huge detriment to them. So by leaving it in there, that gives us, as a planning commission, as a city, the ability to continue to go further south in the future. You know, I'm not saying that that's going to happen tomorrow, but that would give us the ability to go further south a little bit easier by leaving that in there.
Is the south line on the geographical center line? Or does it actually split? Or is it
I
on
don't know that I can
property
answer
lines?
that.
Does it split Central's or does it take it in, all of it?
The line is proposed right now.
Yes.
It takes in those parcels, those particular parcels. And I don't think Central has any property on the south side of where that line is proposed.
Question I didn't look at.
Okay.
Brent has a suggestion, if you would
Okay.
let him speak.
Brent? And please give your name and your address.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners, Chair McGann. I'm Brent Berkland, City Engineer, and I just thought a couple things that could bring to the table a little bit on the discussion. That south line was a meets and bounds description. The airport property is older, and so there's some unusual property descriptions for some of that area over there in general, just because they probably go back to the 1900s early 1900s when the airport was first forming. That south side Central had some very defined boundaries that had been done recently. So that's one thing as far as you'd ask the question on the geographic center line. That's more of a meets and bounds description on that particular segment. But then also Judy had mentioned on the protesting part, I thought since it's newer, we haven't had a planning commission meeting on annexation in a while. I thought, I just mentioned it, Judy and I have talked a little bit on what does that look like. In general, and maybe you want to comment to a little, but in general, typically annexations go through unless there's something pretty egregious that happens. So the way that it sounds like you can protest and kill it, that's true, but it's a pretty narrow band that can happen in. I mean, just because you don't want it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And if you just want to look at Elkhorn was annexed by the city of Omaha. And they fought that for years. And Elkhorn was a Class 1 city. And I'm not saying that that's what anybody's interested in, but I'm just saying that's the point when you go through the annexation process, there's a very narrow band on how it can't happen. And Judy, do you want to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah,
further on that?
and maybe, just to elaborate a little bit with that, I probably made it seem like it was really easy for somebody to protest. It really is not really easy, because what they would have to prove is that we didn't follow state statutes, or that their property was not considered contiguous or urban and suburban in nature. So take, for example, Kroll's property where the sand pit is. They can sit there and say, this is a sand and gravel operation. This is not, urban and suburban, and you're not going to develop it, and there's no reason for us to be in here. Well, they're going to lose that in court pretty easily. I could be pretty confident saying they're going to lose that in court, because sand and gravel operations by previous court cases have been determined as urban and suburban in nature. So they can't win a court case where a precedent has already been set. So things like that. So, like Central saying they may want to pull it out or they may want to protest or whatever, that does not necessarily mean they're going to win. Possibly, they may, but there's a lot of court cases out there as to what's contiguous, what makes sense, why you're doing it, and that's why the study is completed. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
If it's out of order for me to raise my hand, I would like to clarify something, make something very clear right now. I do not see Central protesting a decision by the city to annex our lands. That is not where Central wants to be. Our purpose is to engage with Judy and talk about the potential consequences and if the benefits of including it outweigh the negatives, we understand that. We're just looking to continue to talk and work through it. There may be other solutions. Maybe you add the lands the day you decide you want to annex the lands that you gotta attach to if you want them from the south. So no, we are not looking at all to have any kind of a confrontational position between Central and the city on this, and you shouldn't be expecting a protest from us.
Thank you.
One of the things I do want to add to in some of the conversation, and it wasn't just with Central, but it's been with some other individuals, especially in that 2-mile jurisdiction, they're really concerned with hunting rights. And so what we've talked about as staff is doing an overlay district for recreational type areas or wildlife refuge areas or things like that. Because, we're a community that's built between 2 rivers and people hunt. People hunt every day going down the river. They're hunting, during hunting season, hopefully. But, so that's not.
For that day.
That's not anything that the city wants to take a position on to keep people from hunting. If you do annex properties into city limits, the city does have an ordinance that says no discharge of projectiles within city limits. Well, if we do an overlay district, which would come here kind of like we did an airport overlay district several years back, that would open it up to where certain recreational type lands or recreational type areas would be allowed to do that as long as they follow state guidelines when it comes to hunting and discharging of weapons within distances of homes and things like that.
When you say overlay district, are you referring to something similar, like you're looking at recreational areas within the city, like our place or the museum we've talked about before, just creating a zone where you can do those sorts of things?
Yeah, an overlay district would be very similar. So an overlay district, a lot of this property is zoned ag or zoned floodway. So it would keep that zoning, but then it would also have an overlay district that would say, okay, so it is zoned ag, so any of the buildings that are allowed in an ag district would be allowed, but they also are considered a recreational ground, so they can do these other things also.
Jim.
Yeah,
A question.
They don't have to evacuate the duck blinds right down here.
there you go.
So if this goes through here and goes through the city council and the ordinances all pass, then do we have a certain amount of time to determine the 2-mile area and work with those overlays and so on and so forth, or is that something that has to take place quickly?
I would say that you would want to take care of the overlay district for the hunting as soon as the ordinances are passed or simultaneously, just so we can do that. Now, the 2-mile jurisdiction, like I said in the report, I would wait a year because anybody has a year to actually protest that annexation. So I would wait a year to go out and extend our 2-mile jurisdiction. So as far as a time frame, yes, I would say, we don't have to do it in a year. We could do it in 2 years or 3 years, but I would definitely wait a year before we start moving forward with that.
And on the point of the overlays, you would want it straightforward, which is gonna be an overlay when it goes through.
Yeah, probably very close,
Right.
yeah, close proximity
That's
to
what I was
when we do
thinking.
that.
So it's not complicated or coming up later.
Yep. And what I would suggest is we get one put together and have you guys take a look at it at our next meeting in February.
It's gonna sound like a really dumb question.
No, it isn't.
You say that every time.
From you?
Yeah, imagine that. Can we arbitrarily say we're not gonna extend our 2-mile zoning limit just because we don't want to for a while?
Yeah, you have a choice.
Okay.
You don't have to take it. That's just something that the Nebraska state statute allows. So cities of the first class have 2-mile jurisdiction. Villages have a mile. For example, the village of Wellfleet, they do not exercise their extraterritorial jurisdiction. They take the village of Wellfleet. Anything outside their village limit lines is done through the county. So that would be what we would do if we decide we're not going to take the 2-mile in that area or in any other area. We don't have to, and then the county takes over jurisdiction of that planning and zoning.
There you go.
I anticipate a lively discussion when that comes before this group.
Most of the concerns, and honestly, I will tell you, most of the concerns that I have had when this became public is that 2-mile jurisdiction. There are several, there's a feedlot that would be in that 2-mile jurisdiction, and there are a number of farm, owned farmed, smaller farmers that are in that were really concerned with what that would mean for them if we took them in. So yes, I could definitely see, you kind of laughed about it, but I could see a lively discussion when that does occur.
But the way you just talked about it, we could just simply say, we're not going west.
Yes, we could.
We're done here.
That would be a decision that planning commission and city council
Okay.
could make.
All right.
I would not suggest that, but
No,
yes, it can be done.
But that could be a possible outcome here. Could we only take a mile of the 2 miles? Okay, all right.
Can we
Lively
go one
discussion.
direction and not the other?
Yes, you can choose to exercise it
Pretty
or
much
not.
open.
Can we make a jingle puzzle like this?
We're trying to get away from the jingle puzzle. That is the
Mr.
purpose of
Jacobson.
annexation.
I guess I'd also like to just be on the record and be clear that the airport request it was never our intent to include the 2-mile outside of the airport property. And frankly, I would just encourage you to think long and hard about imposing that 2-mile, given some of the complications and who's out there. Now, I'm not overly convinced that there's a lot of value to that at this stage of the game, and you can always annex some more down the road, but I would expect you're gonna have a very lively conversation there as well. That was never our intent to include anything outside of the property by the airport. Our focus was really to get that area in the city limits, because the city has ownership either directly or indirectly through the airport authority, and that we think this would help us in terms of what we want to get done, but certainly don't want to impose additional restrictions on anyone else in the area, particularly the farmers, feedlot operators, et cetera, and frankly, creating a whole new set of issues. As far as the hunting thing, I also empathize with the hunting side. I do get a little concerned about those that might be hunting ducks or geese when planes are landing, but that we've been able to get along okay up to now. So just for the record, we are not advocating for the 2-mile, to take the 2-mile.
Some of that property to the west of the airport's got to already be in the west, in the 2-mile, correct?
Yes, all of the area that we are talking about is within the 2-mile jurisdiction.
Oh, yeah, because the blue line is.
Yeah.
Really talking to the east, north, and south.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Comments, other questions? Then I think you have on the front page of the summary report a proposed motion.
Yeah, you would think this would be a lot longer, given some of them that we do, but this one's pretty simple.
It's been almost an hour.
So I would entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I move to adopt the 2021 City of North Platte Annexation Study, East 4th Street and East Highway 30, and recommend approval of the proposed annexations.
Second.
Moved by Fudge, second by Bain. Any comments? Vote. Motion carries. And Judy?
Okay, and this will go to the city council. It is scheduled for February 15th at 5:30, and it will be a public hearing and the first reading on the first proposed ordinances.
Do we need these kept with the record since they were introduced to us?
We can make copies of them if he wants them back.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Next,
Madam Chair?
okay, Judy, I'll give that to you. Thank you.
This too, that actually lists the.
Oh, good,
perfect.
thank you, thank you.
The highlight one is just the one you see.
Gotcha. Next item on the agenda is item number 4, discussion of the zoning code update. And Judy?
The only thing I want to say here is that staff discussed this a little bit, and since it's going to be a major update of zoning, we wanted to hold a council work session. And what I proposed to the mayor was to hold a joint city council and city planning commission work session so that we could get all of our concerns aired, because we've went to a lot of work. I hate to have one little piece of misinformation cause us to go back and start over again. So Angie, the city clerk, is trying to get a date that's going to work for the council. And then it will be something that'll be advertised as a joint session. So then all of you are welcome to attend and give any input. The council will probably sit here. Since they're elected, you guys will have to sit in the audience, but
I'll
yeah.
be out there.
But that way.
At least have the front row.
There you go, put you in the front row. But that way, if they have any questions, because I think I have a pretty good idea of what you guys were thinking when we were doing this and discussing that and everything, but a lot of times it's better when it comes directly from you. So I don't have to sit there and say, well, I believe this is what their intent was. And that way you guys can jump up and say, no, I'm the one that said that, and I think this is why we need to have it this way or whatever. So I just think it's just good to get it all out there, get everybody's concerns addressed before we actually move forward with a public hearing. So that's hopefully the first week in February. She's looking at February 3rd, but again, she's going to check with council members and see if that day's going to work.
At what
Not a
day?
good day. I'll tell her that.
Which day?
She's looking at the 3rd, which is a Thursday, I believe, but
What time?
I don't know. She I think just sent out an email to the council today, so I'm not sure if that date's even going to work for them. So,
Okay.
and if the first week doesn't work, we'll get it done the second week of February. The whole intent is to try and get that first initial public hearing on our February agenda, if at all possible.
Okay. Okay, comments or questions on that? I think that'll be another lively discussion, huh?
That'll be another lively discussion.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Item number 5 is election of officers. And Judy, do you have any comments to make before we have a discussion on that?
I really don't. Every person that is an officer, so we have Marilyn, that's the chair, Nelson, that is the vice chair. They are eligible for re-election, or anybody else.
And do we have a secretary?
It's vice chair /
Oh,
secretary.
you're
There,
both.
he volunteered.
She's the recording secretary, so that's different. But yeah, we just have 2 officers.
Okay.
And your term is up in June,
July.
June or July?
Or
Well,
until she gets appointed.
It's the end of June or until
Think
the
we
mayor
need to
actually
reappoint her.
replaces her, which could be August, September, or, next June.
What?
Look at her face.
In other words, you're
We
not
forget
gonna
to
get rid of it.
replace her.
But technically, yeah, if we forget to tell the mayor that she's
Next
done,
year,
or-
Marilyn.
Yeah,
Oh.
no, technically it is June of 22, so, or July 1st, I guess.
July 1st, yeah. We are going to need a motion.
Motion for Marilyn to continue as vice or chairman until she's gone.
Second that.
Okay, to keep it the way
Until
it
she's
is,
gone.
Yeah,
everybody in their positions?
yep,
Okay, motion to retain both,
yep.
okay.
All right, that was Angie
I'll second.
and Jeff Bain, second. Any discussion?
Do you wanna talk about it, or
You okay with that?
I'm good with that, yeah. Why are you going, huh?
Because
Are you
I'm
good with it?
thinking about the mayor, that's what I'm
well.
thinking. Yes, I'm okay
You
with
said
that.
next year, so.
Okay, clicker vote.
I voted.
You're not voting? No.
Could have thrown a no in there.
Okay.
Would've passed
Current
anyway.
officers will serve until whatever happens. Motion carried.
Does it still hell freezes over?
I didn't say that, Mr. Weber. Is there any old business? Any new business? Okay, before I adjourn, I would like to say that I have enjoyed serving as your chair. It has been very interesting. And I know, one of the reasons that I enjoy doing this is because I know that you guys and gals do your homework ahead of time. You've looked at the materials, you've studied, you've asked questions and so on and so forth. And that makes this job a whole lot easier. So I appreciate your doing the behind-the-scenes work, and I know the paycheck is still in the mail, and it's not ever gonna get there. But I appreciate that because it's much easier to work with a group of people who have done their homework. And I appreciate that very much. So, thank you. Anything else? We are adjourned.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Let me see, when are we having the next public hearing? I think I'll be gone.
Oh, what day?
Yeah,
I went to St. Pat's. I had to do my homework.
You got way more time to do your homework now.
Let's see, one of these I wanna take with me. This one has my notes.